Hi, my name is Dawn Volpe. I'm the pastor of Ephraim Moravian Church, and I'm standing here on sacred ground. The Ephraim Moravian Church was built in the 1800s. It's over 150 years old. The Moravians came to Ephraim in 1853. But I want to talk to you about another very sacred place, and that's up the hill from here on Norway Street. It's our cemetery. And it enfolds all our sacred ancestors, the people who built Ephraim, the people who loved this place and gave us such a marvelous legacy. You're here because you're going to see some of our dearly departed. They've been gone for many years, but every year we resurrect them for a few moments so that they can tell their story. We started this 10 years ago because we who are above ground wanted to honor those who are beneath the ground. The people that you're going to hear from, some of them lived through the 1918 pandemic. Now, of course, when they were living, there was no Revo, there was no internet, but they survived, and so will we. We're publishing this on All Saints' Day. Now, I don't think any of the people that we're talking about would say that they were saints. They weren't just saints because they died and went to the Savior. They were saints because they built this beloved community, because they loved God's people. You're going to hear their joys and their sorrows. I hope that in another 100 years, when we're below ground, that someone will speak of our legacy in this beloved community. Thank you so much for being here, and may you have a blessed day.
Good afternoon. I'm Gigi, and I will be your guide for the cemetery walk. I would like to present Angela Sherman, who is portraying one of my very, very best friends, organist at our church, Bernice Koehler.
Oh, hello there. I'm sorry, were you sitting there long? I didn't mean to keep you waiting. I was just practicing my accordion to play for the Scandinavian dancers during Fearball Festival, which I played every year until I was in my 60s. I also had the honor of being named Fearball Chieftain in 1998. My mother taught me to play the accordion. My mother and I would play the accordion while my father played the violin or the banjo. The accordion was my playful side, and it helped me keep a close connection with my parents. But before I continue to reluctantly tell you about myself, let me introduce myself. My name is Bernice Koehler, and I have a long history here in Ephraim and with the Ephraim Moravian Church. I was born in 1930 in Liberty Grove. My family lived on Town Line Road, just past Sherman Road over here. So we were just outside the Ephraim limits, and I attended the Liberty Grove one-room schoolhouse. But Ephraim pastor George Westfall baptized me in my parents' home on May 11, 1930. My parents came here from Sawyer, Wisconsin before I was born. My dad, Elmer Lang, worked for the Valentines, who owned the Valentine Hotel. He convinced the Valentines to let his girlfriend, my mother Josephine, come to work for them as a cook as well. My parents married after they moved here and started their family. I was the youngest of 3 children. I had an older brother, Robert, and I lost my sister Norma at a very young age. In 1942, James Weingarth, the pastor at Ephraim Moravian Church, came to my home to ask my mother if I would be the organist at church. "Oh, heavens no! She's only in grade school," my mother said. I was only 12 years old and was taking piano lessons from Helen Soames. My mother knew how much I practiced, because it often got me out of helping her do the dishes. But she didn't mind, because then she got to listen to music while she did the dishes. However, she was concerned that I wasn't ready for such a responsibility. But Pastor Weingarth didn't take my mother's no for an answer and waited with my mother at our home until I returned home from school that day. When I returned home, I said I wasn't sure I was ready for such a big and hard job, and that there must be somebody else who could do it. Pastor Weingarth convinced me by saying, "Try it a few Sundays and let us know if you'd like to keep on." Despite having to teach myself to play the organ, I remained the organist at Ephraim Moravian Church until I retired on January 8th, 2006, after over 60 years. On my 35th anniversary as the organist, the church gave me this beautiful pendant. I wore it every day, and especially every Sunday. It's been a really special piece for me, and I keep it close to my heart. But in all my time working as the organist at church, I worked with 18 different pastors. With each change of pastorate, I would sigh and say, "Another one to train." Pastor Wolf from Flegel used to say, "Hit it, Bernice," at the end of each service. And I'd sometimes fight back the urge to play the beer barrel polka for the postlude. As everyone was talking and leaving church, they didn't know what I was playing, after I had spent so much time picking out music and practicing for each service. But I'm glad to see that that has changed, as the current music director, Colin Welford, now has a captive audience until he finishes. I practiced every Saturday for Sunday's service. When I got older, I brought my granddaughter, Melissa, to practice with me. I loved exploring what the organ could do. Melissa used to say to me, "Gamma, you're so quiet, and the organ is so loud." And I'd say, "Exactly." I tried to hide it, but I know that she could sense my nervousness. I never got over the nervousness of playing in front of a crowd. But I knew that as a follower of Jesus, I had tasks to do. Playing the organ and helping the congregation worship were my tasks, and I wanted to do them to the best of my ability. I truly felt like I was doing God's work through my music. I was even an alto in the choir, even when the choir was just Ted Hepner and I. I hated playing for funerals because I didn't like to watch people I knew cry. I felt such a responsibility to make sure weddings and funerals were perfect, which was a very hard feat for my anxiety. But I always trusted God to help me get through it, and He always did. In the summers from 1944 to 1976, I couldn't play the organ at church in the summer because I had to help my parents operate their lodging, Lang's Resort, which is now called the Old Post Office. I was playfully referred to as our winter organist. Ruth Jones was my co-partner, and she played in my summer absence. When the resort sold in 1976, I became the postmistress for the Ephraim Post Office, in addition to a variety of other jobs in the Door County tourism industry, mostly in shops in Northern York. Even though I was still just learning to play the piano in elementary school, by the time I got to high school, they thought I was good enough to play the piano for the high school chorus. When I graduated in 1947, Gibraltar was called the Rock instead of the Vikings. I stayed in Northern Door County following high school and started a family. My oldest daughter, Jeanette, died at 9 months old. Then came David in 1952. Kathy in 1959, and John in 1960. In addition to the loss of my daughter, I also had many devastating miscarriages. But my surviving children blessed me with grandchildren and then great-grandchildren. Music lived in our Bailey's Harbor farmhouse, where the first organ I bought, a Hammond, was delivered in 1965. When my mother-in-law could no longer manage the large house at her lodging, the Shelter, which is now called the French Country Inn, she moved into a smaller home, and we moved my Hammond into our new house at the Shelter in Ephraim. When the Shelter sold, my children were grown and starting families of their own. So I moved in with my mother, Josephine Lang, into her house right across the street on Spruce Lane. When my mother died, I continued to live into that house until 2015 when I moved into the Meadows at Scand. Many people didn't know this, but I was a huge NASCAR fan. Even after I moved into the Meadows, I watched NASCAR races all the time. At first I cheered for Jeff Gordon. I mean, who didn't? But by the end, I was always cheering for Jimmy Johnson. I died on September 2nd, 2018. While I had a bad heart, I also had a broken heart over the grief of the death of my son David and his wife Sherry a few years earlier. I was no longer playing the organ at church, but I attended services every Sunday, till my health no longer allowed me to. I have such fond memories of being the organist at Ephraim Moravian Church, playing my accordion for the Scandinavian dancers during Fierball Festival, and being a part of the Ephraim community. But I have gone on way too long about myself. I don't consider myself extraordinary in any way. But my granddaughter and grandson's friend insisted that I was important enough to come and share my story with you. So I hope that your lives are filled with the pleasure of carrying out God's task for you, just as mine was. Thank you for coming to see me today.
Thank you, and another thing that Bernice did was she took the whole choir right before Christmas, played her accordion, and took them to all the homes to carol. Thank you again.